Welcome to the acclaimed podcast, The Deep Dive, featuring your esteemed hosts, Andy Monitor and Drew Dinzik, powered by BetSperts.
Welcome to The Deep Dive. Andy, welcome back from vacation. It is a glorious Monday here. A lot of our friends were in Vegas over the weekend. I acted like I was in Vegas. I am pretty hungover today, but that is not going to stop us from putting a bow on these divisional previews. We are up to division number 8. If you haven't already done the math and figured it out, that is the AFC North. And today we're doing the bottom of the black and blue AFC North, which is the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cleveland Browns. Andy, how you doing?
Yeah, and every year, I wish we would have kept notes on these the last few years. The reason why we did the last, the last division last, I feel like we left it for the AFC East last year because there was a lot of uncertainty. As much as Mac Jones was like a rookie of the year favorite for parts of the season, there was a lot of chaos and tumult preseason with the quarterback situation there until Cam kind of saw himself out the door. So I feel like it's usually a quarterback that's, maybe there's a division where there's a couple quarterbacks. And I think when we posited this one, we said, hey, we also may have a competition in Pittsburgh, which obviously doesn't look like actually what's happening. So, but yeah, one man's insatiable appetite for being a creep has pushed this to the end. And, we're not going to get into that. It's fine. We'll try to focus more on the actual product on the field for Cleveland. But Cleveland was what pushed this one to the end. And we did finally get resolution to that situation. But we will start with the Pittsburgh Steelers, who were, just a weird team the last couple of years. I remember I had them as a team I liked, and they were probably my least, inspiring, like 11-0, 12-0 team wherever they were a couple of years ago of all time. I'm like, this team sucks. I don't know how they keep winning. I wish I could just trade out of all these positions. But and then last year, just another goofy team where you could tell like the quarterback was just toast. There were some bright spots, but this team wasn't any good. Despite everything Tomlin's done for many, 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 many years, he's still not an aggressive coach, not keeping up with the time as far as analytics or however you want to put it. Just, the aggressiveness index that certain places keep. And lo and behold, wild card weekend, this team is taking the field. So Crazy. It was a goofy year. Yeah, that was, I don't know, what your major takeaway outside of that?
Well, they were a hot fade heading into last season. If you remember, a lot of people kind of had identified that they were sort of that was a little bit of a unsustainable run from them the prior year, which ultimately ended in a round 1 playoff dispatching. I think that in general, people expected more chaos, more of a, kind of a swoon from Roethlisberger as he was entering his year 39 season and just didn't show you much life left in that arm coming down the home stretch in 2020. But they come out of the gates with an impressive win against the Bills. And then the rest of their season was bizarre because generally they took care of business against the chumps and they lost to the good teams. But there's a couple really close calls in there. They had to go to overtime to get by Geno Smith. They had to come from behind to beat the Bears when the Bears weren't beating anybody. They needed an overtime win against the Ravens to clinch their playoff berth in the final week of the season, and even that was with Ravens were an entirely second unit team. They tied the Detroit Lions, for crying out loud. That was the worst game. That was the worst game of the regular season.
That was the worst. Like, if you had to rewatch one game, it used to be 256. I don't know how many there are now. You got to add 16 more, I guess. 280, 282, 272. But that would be 272 out of 272 as far as games. I would rewatch. It was horrible. And truth be told, it was probably the game that got them into the playoffs, all things considered. They finished 9-7-1 against second place in the division. The Colts, the Dolphins, and the Chargers all finished 7-8. So just had that extra loss. And even, the last weekend, they needed to beat the Ravens, which wasn't like some Herculean feat. Well, like you said, that team was beat to shit. It was practically their second team. They had nothing to play for outside of spoiler. But they needed the Jags to beat the Colts as well, because I think they only had the tiebreaker over Miami. So they needed the Colts to lose to the Jags. They needed to win their game, which it took them overtime to beat that shitty Ravens team at that point. And then they also needed our tie game. The tie game has come up like on 6 podcasts now, I think so. The Raiders Chargers couldn't end in a tie or a Chargers win. I think they needed the Raiders to win outright. So that timeout kind of put the Steelers in the playoffs, where they who scored the first touchdown in that playoff game, Drew?
TJ Watt, DPOY.
TJ Watt, DPOY. We'll get to him a little more, but yeah, I went and looked at that box score because I'm like, how did they score 21? And I looked, and they had the fumble recovery by TJ Watt, and then it was 35 consecutive by Kansas City, and then at that point, the last 2 touchdowns, even though the second to the last touchdown was in the third quarter, still pretty much window dressing at that point. They were not a team that was going to beat anybody in the playoffs. There's too many problems with this team, and they got the shit beat out of them. So,
yeah, man. If you had Pittsburgh plus 12.5, you were feeling pretty damn good with that TJ Watt touchdown. You're like, all right, man. Because the TJ Watt score was in the second quarter. So you avoided any damage in the first quarter. You get the first touchdown in the second quarter, and you might be thinking like, hey, man, here we go. Let's get a defensive masterpiece here, and we got something. Turned out that there were 63 total points scored, which went well over the closing total of 46.5. Chiefs, not only did they were a very popular teaser leg, I remember, but even more so, they really never sweated that 12.5. From halftime on, you were in good shape there. But the fact that they got to the playoffs, that was a win for the Steelers team. And that's sort of been the hallmark of the Mike Tomlin regime. And a lot of people have pointed this out. And in fact, any Steelers preview you've heard has referenced this, but Tomlin has shown an ability to do 2 things very, very, very effectively over his tenure with the Steelers. The first is coaching up borderline players to at least replacement level, if not better. And just in general, keeping this franchise, even in years where Roethlisberger was down, Roethlisberger was hurt, or there was clear problems or holes overall, they still remain relatively competitive, even in a difficult division, in a difficult conference. So credit to Mike Tomlin. 9-7-1 was somewhat magical for him to pull that off with that team last year. Would you agree?
Yeah. Like you said, they were a fade. And throughout the Tomlin era, and Colbert too, the GM, whatever, it's just been a team that's been able to identify talent in the draft, especially at the wide receiver spot. They took a Mac quarterback before that was cool, made that work. I mean, his rookie year didn't they win like an obscene amount of games?
They were 15-1, I believe.
Was it 15? I was going to say 14 and 15-1. Like, just things have worked out during the Tomlin, and I think the front office probably needs more credit, because not only the wealth of wide receivers that they found in the draft over the last however many years, but of the defensive side of the ball too, drafting and picking up free agents. And honestly, for a long time, it was everything. Like they were able to put together a lot of good offensive linemen too. They had a real 3 years ago, it was a top tier offensive line. I mean, they lost God, we'd have to go back and I bet it's the 2020. They lost everybody. I think it was three. I think it was a retirement and 2 trades or something. They lost most of that offensive line. The offensive line, that is one of the holes that maybe got.
They haven't been that. Yeah, the offensive line hasn't been.
It's been bad for a couple of years, but last year
I'm over here laughing
bad.
my ass off. I clicked on Mike Tomlin's Pro Football Reference page just because I was curious what his winning win-loss percentage was. No, he did go to William and Mary, which is. Yeah, interesting. But his picture on Pro Football Reference is somebody surprised him. They were like, "Hey, Tomlin," you're like, "What?" It is quite a silly.
I was
picture.
wondering if you were watching tennis or what was making you laugh.
Well, no, I'm laughing at Tomlin's surprised picture. He's like his overall win percentage in 15 seasons is 643, which is elite. I bet you that's better than Belichick, or it's close, right? What do you think Belichick?
Oh my God. Is? It's like the Phil Mickelson picture that they use where he looks like he's just woke up from a 3-day bender.
Yeah, yes,
and
yes.
Like
exactly.
he's pale and gross. The Tomlin picture is up there. That is something.
Yeah, that's funny.
He does look quite surprised. Everyone should go look that up. Pro Football Reference.
Okay. Okay. So anyway, not quite as good of a win-loss.
And they did have a couple Super Bowls. Obviously, that was nice. But yeah, just even the down years were just not down years, which I think that speaks even more to like what I said, the front office, the talent evaluators, the scouts, that whole department. Like, they just don't have top 5 picks. You're doing all this in the middle to late rounds.
That's a great point.
Really, really making for a long time now. Just you haven't had these top picks unless the only way to get a top pick was to trade some pieces away to get something good like that. But no, kudos to them. It's almost like the
draft and develop.
Yeah, what did we say about like Tom Brady? Like, obviously he's not going to be playing till he's 60. Like, there's going to finally be a year where he's bad, or he just retires before that happens. Well, the Tomlin, it feels like it's kind of the same thing. Everyone's just like, I can't keep doing this. You can't keep getting away with it. But this year, like even last year, if you go back and look at last year's schedule, it was tough. And I'd have to go look. I feel like Cleve put it in his thing under his luck. Yeah. 8-2 record in 1-score games. Ooh. They had 10 1-score games. First off, like the 8-2 record is eye-popping, but to have 10 1-score games, first off, is something. And then to win 80% of those is something. So maybe regression, but I don't know. Like, everything points to it. Hey, Tomlin isn't the coach who's aggressive on 4th downs. The quarterback's 1 million years old. The schedule is hard. Again, they still have a winning record somehow. It was kind of Rams-esque, where they were really thin at certain positions, and they had some superstars. Like, you had some wide receivers that were stars. They didn't really come through as much as we thought they would. Up-and-coming tight end. You have a couple of bona fide stars on the defensive side of the ball. So they're just like a shitty version of the Rams, and they didn't get that injured either. Like, I guess Watt missed a couple games, but he tied the sack record in the games he played. He only played 15. Like, that's something. So, I mean, they made the most of what they had. And as much as I have dogged on Tomlin several times for not riding the analytics wave, he's still a good developer of talent. He's still a good leader of men. I don't know. We've never seen him do a rebuild, though.
No. They have always reloaded, never rebuilt. And I guess my other general thought about the franchise of the Steelers, and they are in a transition. Not only are they, not only have we closed the book now on the Ben Roethlisberger era, Kevin Colbert, this is his last draft.
Yep.
He has moved on. And so now you have a new regime in the drafting department as well, which is, it's going to be interesting. But over the Tolbert and Ben Roethlisberger kind of in concert, the characteristics of what made them special is, again, they drafted well, but they developed those players into bona fide pros. And then they were never out there in the free agent market, like really spending away. They were always just doing their, signing their own guys. And there's a lot to be said about operating that way, where you're rewarding the guys who are developing well within your system and paying them and keeping them on board. Like, it's cheaper to do that than it is to go fill holes in free agency, certainly. And so I think you have to just respect that the Steelers have an elite culture, really. And they came into last season with some tweaks, ostensibly a lot of the talk in the preseason, off season before last year's Steelers games was, we're going to do things differently. We bring in Matt Canada. He's going to run the offense a little differently. It's going to, we're going to ask more out of Ben Roethlisberger. All that turned out to be complete fluff and nonsense. They were extremely easy to telegraph and game plan for. They were literally like, we're going to give Najee Harris as many carries as he can possibly handle. He ended up being an absolute bell cow for them in terms of workload. And he was fine, not great. Their two best players by
he had a lot of yardage, but it was by
right.
volume.
Yeah,
like they just gave him the ball.
It was all by volume. It was all volume. And but you know what? If you have a rookie running back that you gave up that much draft capital before, you better use him. He better be getting that kind of volume because Roethlisberger wasn't great with the ball in his hands. I had him graded as a bottom 7 quarterback last year in the NFL. Yet he went to a playoff game, which is absolutely again absurd.
Yeah, I think you kind of called that bullshit preseason, like that we're going to ask more from Ben. It's like, well, you could, I can ask my 7-year-old to go get a job as like a CEO of a big company. It's like it's not going to happen. He's just not smart enough.
Not going to happen.
He's just a child.
Not going to happen.
So, but yeah, the Ben stuff, it felt weird, and you saw it immediately, like you said, Najee, tons of volume, even behind a bad line where he was getting hit a lot sooner than most running backs would like to, and he still made the most out of it. And then Ben, I'd have to go look this up. I feel like I had this written down. His depth of target was something. Like he just turned into, this is what I have left. They had some good receivers and he had a good tight end, but his depth of target was shorter than his rap sheet. It was It was
a weird offense.
Check down stuff. It was a weird offense. And that was the biggest thing. And I don't delve into fantasy enough, but the people that just like, oh man, I almost said Juju. That's not who I'm thinking of. Your other wide receiver whose name is, you can tell I was off for a week. Oh, Claypool. Like the people, the people's like, oh, Claypool's going to have this big step forward. I'm like, well, is Ben getting hurt in week 1? Like he's not the kind of receiver who's going to have a big year if Ben is continuing to regress like this. I was hoping. I love Claypool. I had a lot of fun with him. He was, he was an exciting player 2 years ago, but it was kind of a rough year in that offense. And like you said, just a weird offense.
Yeah.
But it was the weird-ish offense that kind of worked at times combined with a few elite players on defense. I guess no wonder they had 10 games that ended up within a score.
Yeah. And you go to the elite players on defense, they had 2 that qualified as top 10 players in the entire NFL. And they were next to each other, which is big. I actually had Cam Hayward as their most valuable player defensively, even more so than TJ Watt. Some of that was just because he gets the slight nod because of availability. Cam Hayward started all 17 games. Cam Hayward is a 10-year vet from Ohio State, and he is one of the least talked about and most important pieces for any team, for any defense. And it's crazy the way that you get these kind of compounding positives where you got a guy like Hayward and Watt next to each other in the D line, and that you can only dedicate so much attention to one or the other, and it just ends up being perfect synergy. And that's how those guys work out because the Steelers did not have good injury luck last year at all. TJ Watt, as you mentioned, missed a couple of key games. Tyson Alualu was unavailable. They lost the other defensive tackle that they started the season with, Stephon Tuitt. I think he either retired or just never played because of injury. I can't remember, but they did not have a lot of depth, but it didn't matter because those 2 guys were so outstanding that they just elevated the play of everyone else around them. Their linebacking core, which is long been the strength of the Steelers, was kind of lackluster last year. Devin Bush looks like he's maybe on the outs.
Needs some help.
Yeah, he may be on the way
out. It just might not be a thing.
Similarly, though, they paid Minkah Fitzpatrick a lot of money. I thought he was outperformed by Terrell Edmonds in terms of just general contributions. Minkah Fitzpatrick is a funny kind of boomer bust safety, not unlike some of the other kind of players in that vein at safety around the NFL, where he'll create a couple of splash explosive defensive plays for you over the balance of the season, but there are other times he can be completely schemed out of a game. And so it's a defense that's built on the strengths of the defensive line, and that hasn't really changed. This overall is still a formidable unit. defensively, but the offense is an enormous question mark, which is an interesting way, I think, to look at the way that they treated their offseason. Ben Roethlisberger gone. What do? Do you go out there and try to get a retread? Do you try to find some quarterback with tread on the tires? The Jimmy Garoppolos of the world or something like that? Or do you go via draft? And they decided both. We're going to kick the tires on Mitch Trubisky, and we're going to use our first-round draft capital on a quarterback. And hopefully one of those two works out.
They drafted 2 quarterbacks. They actually used a late-round pick on another.
I forgot about that.
An FCS quarter. I think he didn't. I don't think he broke camp. I think he
didn't.
Maybe he can end up on a practice squad, but no, it was a weird spot going into the draft. And I mean, just like transitioning to this year, that was the biggest thing, because it's like, all right, we can fill in some pieces. We'll go get a linebacker. I got Miles Jack, probably an upgrade, at least an upgrade to the overall unit, I think, is where they're at.
Sure. I agree with that.
It's a great defensive line. They have enough pieces in the defensive secondary that they should be good. The run defense could be better, but hopefully Miles Jack and maybe some improvements in the linebacker core help that. But the biggest question, obviously, and always, quarterback. And the biggest, I don't know, the narrative going into the draft was, it sucks they made the playoffs. Like, what if they had a high pick? Then they could take the first quarterback on the board. They did take the first quarterback on the board by 2.5 rounds? How far was it until we had enough? It was an amazing. It was
next quarterback was
Willis.
I don't even remember who the second quarterback was that was taken. Was it Ritter in the third?
I thought Willis. Maybe Ritter was Willis. I just remember. Yeah, it was third round, and amazing. It's all kind of a blur. After I was just mad that the Giants didn't get Willis because we had bets on that. But yeah, it turned out they did get their first shot at the quarterback. They probably could have waited a long time and taken Willis or Ritter or anybody later. They didn't know that at the time. Hindsight's 2020. But yeah, they did use their draft capital on a quarterback who had a hell of a year for Pittsburgh and has one glaring weakness, and that his hands are really, really tiny. And
little bitty hands, yeah.
Yeah, and that is the I mean, the big thing is he fumbled a bunch. I mean, he had a lot of touchdowns, not that many interceptions, but he fumbled a bunch over his career because they're not big hands. That's a thing. And he's going to be playing behind a bad offensive line if he sees time this year. So probably a rough combo to start your year. And that's maybe the reason they got a stopgap, because I don't think anyone thinks that Trubisky is anything but a stopgap or like a bridge quarterback at this point. Like, I don't know. You could make a case that, and we'll do our percentage thing where it's like, hey, 80% of the time Trubisky plays all of this year or most of this year. And then if things go pear-shaped late, you give the rookie some starts just to see what you have early on. And then 10% Trubisky just sucks or gets hurt, and you have to start the rookie because it's like, this isn't going well at all. And then there's probably a 10% of we see 2018 Mitch Trubisky. Again, I'm not a big Matt Canada guy, but maybe he was hampered a little by having to limp. It's like the lady with the walker meme. Like, we won 2 Super Bowls. All right, Grandpa Ben. But yeah, I maybe Matt Canada isn't as bad as I make him out to be, because I'm not a fan of the offense for the most part. But it's tough when man, how much time should I be spending on trying to make this work when I know it's like we're done with this guy soon, maybe 2 years ago. It's tough to say it, but there is a small chance that you see a mobile Trubisky that's get used in the right way, like 2018, where it's like, shit, this guy's good enough to win games. They certainly didn't have the receiving core in Chicago that they have here. You have a pretty good tight end. Again, the line sucks. Decent running back. So there's a non-zero chance that Trubisky just comes in there, wins this damn job. I don't think it's super likely, but such is life.
I would say this about Trubisky. His numbers aren't so low that it's a question of, why bother? What are you doing? What's the idea? What's going on here? His numbers are not that dissimilar from Ryan Tannehill in Miami, you know? And the situation he was in working for Nagy was bad.
You were full tinfoil on that. You thought Nagy was trying to make
it
wasn't the craziest thing you've ever said.
Yeah, I mean Nagy did not know how to run the franchise like an adult, and he was at odds with Pace from the day zero drafting Mitch, and so that was never really going to work. The thing about the two questions are, is there talent there with Mitch? I would say maybe, and then the second question is, will Matt Canada be able to get it out of him if there is talent there? And to that, I'm saying probably not. Like the Canada system doesn't look to me like a professional, like a NFL worthy kind of vision. But if we could be, a little bit premature evaluating it because we only saw it with, like you said, with Grandpa Roethlisberger. So it's somewhat. I would give him 5% chance that this is like, oh, we stumbled into a pot of gold here that we didn't, a reclamation project that turned into be a bona fide top 10. That's like 5, maybe less. And that big meaty body of the distribution is what you said, which is he is a stopgap. He gets benched before the end of the season.
Thing is happening. Like it's
very low. Like
he's like a top 15. Like you say, like shit. We kind of have to roll with this guy. He's playing well enough with his offense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think ultimately, like the big meaty body of the distribution is we see about 10 games out of Trubisky. He's 3-7, and then it's Pickett time. It's Pickett time, baby. And at that point, I agree with your takes about Pickett. Pickett is a huge question mark because of the concerns about his hand size and the fact that he will be behind what is almost surely going to be a bottom 5 O-line, maybe bottom 2. I don't know anyone who does really realistic, good offensive line grading that has much positive to say about this unit. We have Dan Moore at left tackle, Kevin Dotson at left guard, Mason Cole at center, James Daniels at right guard, and Okafor at right tackle. So that's a who's who of nobodies. And I think the coaching has never really been great with the offensive line there. That's maybe the one position they haven't really been able to develop much. They're going to end up having to use Pat Freiermuth in blocking, pass blocking role a ton. They're going to have to use Najee Harris out of the backfield in a blocking role a ton in order to give Trubisky time. But the offensive weapons he has to work with, and Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, and George Pickens is stellar. Like those guys are great. They can create separation. They can, hurt you downfield. For as sad as the Steelers are at developing offensive line players, they have never missed at developing a wide receiver. They are almost impossibly good at that.
They actually took a couple. They took another one from Memphis, Calvin Austin, later in the draft that people think is a decent project. But yeah, Pickens is like, this should work. There's a lot of these receivers, even like I'm not bringing him up because of, where he ended up now, but like Ruggs, I don't want to say I'm right because he's in jail, but like Ruggs heading into the NFL, it's like, man, is he going to translate at an NFL level because of his skill set? And it's fine if you take him in the second round, but like take him as high as you did, it felt like a risky move. But like, and there's guys like that every year, but I don't know. Pickens just feels good. Like he feels like what he does well, just automatically translate, especially when he's not asked to be the focus. Like there's other good receivers on this staff. And then also from the chat too, people are pointing this out too. Like Matt Canada is pro play action movement stuff. Yes. The Steelers just haven't been. It's
they tried
maybe
to run
something
year,
you
just
see
didn't really work great.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. Maybe it's just something that's not going to work well with Big Ben behind under center. And
here's my 2 cents. You ready?
Do you see added a little more this year?
The sequencing was the fail part of it last year because they tried it. Like that was the big guy. That was the big kind of sales pitch for the Steelers offense heading into 2021 was Matt Canada. He's gonna get Ben Roethlisberger to buy into his vision and actually run the play action instead of checking out of it every time. And he did. But the problem was still the sequencing. Like, he came at it with a very old school mindset of, I need to run and run and run to set this up, or it's not going to work. And the running game was always stuck in mud there, so he was legitimately donking off downs with early down runs, 2nd and 10 runs that, you saw him coming a mile away. They had they ran into stacked boxes at an incredible clip too. Like, they even conceptually, even if you buy into play action might work, I still have huge questions about Canada being able to do all the rest of the parts correctly. And oh, by the way, like, Trubisky still can't throw to half the field. At least we've never seen him.
It's let's be field half full. Like, he can throw well to one half of the field.
Okay, very good.
I know. I need to figure out for fantasy purposes. You need to figure out which of these receivers is lining up on which side of the field, because the other guy is toast. And
So,
again, not only for fantasy purposes, but for the purposes of I like him and I hope he plays well. I hope the offensive line takes a miniature step forward, because Freiermuth having to be an extra lineman sucks. Like, I'd like to see him out on routes more. So to answer the question, reload or rebuild, this
looks like a rebuild.
More of a rebuild than anything we've seen for a long time from this team. And I mean, even at just one position, all it takes is switching quarterbacks, and you say, well, it's probably a rebuild at this point. So the uncertainty, and I haven't really got a good quote saying, hey, we'll go with Kenny when it's time. Like, the teams are cagey about that sort of shit, and it sucks. But I think you're probably onto something with like the 10 games, or if Trubisky's truly horrid, if it's just not a good match, like, you have to go put him out there. And again, I don't know how much every team believes in this. We've never got to see this. We did get the Hodges and Mason Rudolph year, but that was out of necessity. This is one of those things where we have no idea how this team's philosophy is, as far as, hey, we need to figure out what we have in Kenny Pickett right now. And I mean, because there's teams that just don't believe in that shit and don't end up getting, they end up wasting a year of a rookie contract, not knowing even what they have. You have a mystery box sitting on the bench while you let Mitch Trubisky guide you to a 7-10 season. Still got to adjust to 17 games. So, it's everything.
The rebuild, in my opinion, is going with Trubisky for more than 10 games, because then that basically guarantees, in my opinion, that you're elongating the process of getting Pickett up to speed. You've made your bet now that he's a guy you can slide in as the future of the franchise. The sooner you get the inexperienced reps out of the way, the sooner you are competing again. And honestly, like, again, we're in a quarterback rich draft next year. If Kenny Pickett turns out that he can't play in your conditions, which are wet and cold and outdoors,
didn't even get to that. Hey, you had to play in Cleveland and Baltimore every year.
If he can't compete in your home, your neck of the woods up there in the cold, wet AFC North, then you better be prepared to move on in next year's draft, a la Josh Rosen. And I'm not sure where I don't have an opinion at all on Pickett's skill set yet, but the hands and the cold weather thing, definitely red flags.
Yeah, 10 of your games every year are in Pittsburgh, Baltimore, and Cleveland.
Yeah.
And more sometimes. Now there could be 11 on the odd number years. We're probably going to have 12 eventually once we get to 18.
And I know he played in Pittsburgh in college, but like, for whatever reason, like, number one, those games earlier in the season. Number two, he had very few bad weather games, particularly last year. And that's going to be a huge question until he proves he can do it.
And the thing is too, it's like, he played in Pittsburgh in college and he fumbled a lot.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So
like it was a good year as far as, hey, you threw a lot of touchdowns in the ACC, but you also, I got to find this now, over the course of over the court. Oh, defense. These are defensive fumbles. That's not what I want. Well, why would you do that to me, bro? Or sportsreference.com. Yeah, only 7 interceptions. He really, really played well. I had a Heisman ticket on him. I got a kind of a rogue number at one point. Somebody talked me into it. I said I was as big of a Kenny Pickett fan as anybody last year.
Sure, of course. Yeah, no doubt. So we'll see. I think ultimately, though, like we mentioned, like there's huge question marks about the offensive line here. I definitely don't feel great about some of the secondary. You have one of the most talented defensive lines in all of football, and that gets you somewhere. But you have guys taking snaps for you and at the second level who are replacement level at best, and that's maybe if you coach them up. So still a lot of reasons to be concerned and or skeptical about this roster overall. And at the same time, like, I mean, if they were in the NFC North instead of the AFC North, we might have a different tune. But sorry, guys, you're in the most stacked conference I can remember in my life, on top of being in a division that the margins, you just by default, you're fourth. So,
39 stuck out with me. It was actually 38. But my favorite thing about Kenny Pickett's fumbling hands was when I Googled it, the first article came up was from like a Steelers fan site, contextualizing all of Kenny Pickett's fumbles in his college career. Like they're already rationalizing this pick.
Oh no.
Which again, he could be very good. He was electric when he was on. He was a lot of fun, and it was, the ACC is a little down. I'll give it that. But he played more games than another ACC quarterback that's on this roster. So he's old. He's like probably 26. I don't know how old this guy's now. 20. Are we not going to give birthdays on this anyway? Anyway, he was at school. He was at school for 5 years, so he's old enough. 23, 24, something like that. He's been around the block. It's not like the Trubisky.
Yeah, he has. That's true.
The guy had started for 1 year. So
Trubisky is how old is Trubisky?
It's been 5 years since he was.
He's 28. Yeah, he just turned 28. Yeah, he just turned 28. So interesting. I don't know. I mean, Trubisky, not the answer long term, ultimately. And the defense has some elite players, but some issues. And I think end of the day, it's going to make it that much more difficult for you to to realize something positive out of the season, to keep the streak alive for Mr. Mike Tomlin. You know what streak I'm talking about.
Oh yeah. What are you put the odds that the quarterback that starts in 2024 isn't on the roster right now? Not next year.
Yeah.
Year after.
33%.
A little higher.
You're a little higher.
I don't know if I'm a Pickett believer.
Okay. That sounds like you're not.
If you end up with like, what if it is a dumpster show and Tomlin just calls it quits? You have the newish GM, you have a new coach. Maybe they want to go.
Do you think Tomlin needs to change the scenery?
Man, the thing is too, like, I was thinking, like, will Tomlin retire? Fuck, he's not old.
No. He's young.
Like, I forgot how young he was when he was with Minnesota.
50 years old.
He's 50. Like, he's got 20 years left in him if he wants. He can coach forever.
Yeah.
He looks great. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe.
Any comment on his skin?
See. So the combination of
Andy Reid's out there at age 68. Belichick's out there. Is Belichick 70 now?
70.
Yeah, so he's got they got 20 years on this guy.
All right. Yeah. So the combination of real high uncertainty at the quarterback position, a bad offensive line, a play caller who probably isn't good. We gave him a little bit
wasting downs.
Maybe it was more Ben related, but the play sequencing says otherwise. You have stars on defense, but you also have some gaps, and defense alone is not going to win you games. And then again, another year of a tough schedule, and he can't continue to just win every close game like they have. So it does feel like we're doing this team first out of the 4 teams for a reason. It feels like maybe this is the streak breaking year for Tomlin. And maybe he does move on at some point. Maybe he pulls like and we haven't even seen this cycle come to fruition yet, but Peyton, where he does the year off. Or, a couple coaches have done that where they just take the year off, end up somewhere eventually. Like Tomlin could use a break.
Yeah,
he deserves it.
He's not crazy.
15 goddamn years of just, trucking along in the Steel City, having to live in Pittsburgh. It's not fun up here up north.
It's not even Heinz
Cold
Field
every damn
anymore.
winter.
Everything's new. Colbert's gone. Ben's gone. Yeah. I mean, it does feel like things go sideways. This may be a regime change out of just we need fresh blood. Not that Tomlin isn't capable of leading the Steelers back to a Super Bowl in his life. I think that's very much on the table, and maybe even conversated about if things aren't going well. But yeah, I think the Steelers have to be squarely the 4th best expected team in this division. If everyone is healthy, I think that's how this breaks.
Then before we go schedule and odds, just we touched on the defense a bunch already. Like TJ Watt, if he's healthy, is the best defensive player in the league. He does a lot. He does everything.
He's in the conversation. He's never going to be an Aaron Donald for me.
No, but I mean,
Micah Parsons has already passed him in my mind as well.
Apples. I hate comparing. What Aaron Donald does to other people, because it's just such a different. What he's asked is so different. I'm fine. He's top 3 edge, slash outside whatever. Like I'll put him there. He's going to be a top.
Definitely.
He plays all 17.
Yes.
He's a top 5 overall defensive player.
Absolutely give you that.
Micah Parsons doesn't have the sample size to merit just saying that. He's very good, but I mean, teams haven't had a chance to adjust to that yet. So
true.
It's not like an offensive player where you can just adjust, because it's defense is more reactive. But yeah, I'm with you there. Minka's great. Like you said, maybe not even the best safety on the squad. You added Miles Jack. You have Ironhead Hayward's kid, RIP, from my childhood. And yeah, it should be a good defense if people stay. Like again, I don't know how much you put that sort of stock. Like if the offense stinks, if the wide receivers go to waste again, and we don't see Matt Canada flipping a switch here now that we have a new kind of regime in place. I don't know. Like it might be one of those where, hey, this is a really good defense on a 6-win team. Like it's not that fun. It's not fun to watch a great defense continually go out there and stop a team on like 8 out of 11 drives. They just stonewall them, and the team loses 21-3. That's not fun to watch as a fan, as a backer.
No, you know why it's especially not fun is because these guys are set up well to get off the field in garbage time. And so you're going to get a lot of the Mitch Trubisky experience in comeback mode. And that's going to be what you're asked to watch more than even the defensive stars. You know what I mean?
Patrick says you can compare Aaron Donald to Myles Garrett now.
Oh,
yeah, the helmet swinging. Good call. Good call, Patrick. Kind of nailed that one. But the defense, I mean, where's your floor for the defense if it's healthy-ish?
16.
Yeah. Like if things don't get better at the linebacking core, if they don't improve in run defense, which they were kind of bad at, it's a middle of the pack defense with some flashes where it's like, hey, this is a great defense. It gets a lot of sacks, but they're giving up a bunch of points because the offense isn't staying on the field, and they do have some holes, and you can run against them. And maybe the corners aren't as everything you'd want out of that. So top 10 is the ceiling, middle of the pack's the floor. Put it all together, and yeah, like you said, and we'll get to this next, add the schedule in, and that's why we're kind of looking at a middling team that's leaning closer to the top of the draft than middling.
So the AFC North crosses with the AFC East.
Yep.
And a cross with the NFC South. Those are both pretty positive. I think you're pretty stoked to draw those non-divisional opponents. Pittsburgh, by finishing second in division last year, gets the extra opponent, Philly. So not an ideal matchup. In division, you don't match up well against Cincinnati. They beat you twice last year. They have all the depth at wide receiver that really can make your secondary miserable. You don't match up great against Baltimore because Lamar Jackson is exceptionally athletic and can absolutely give your linebackers fits. And you don't match up.
And you can't stop the run.
No.
Maybe the three best running backs are all in Cleveland in the damn division.
Yeah.
Not the three. I hate to put Ernest up there, but the two best running backs in the damn division are on the same team, and you can't stop the run. So
that's right.
Even with Brissett under center, you don't match up good in 6 games right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
And then you also drew Tampa. You draw Buffalo away. You draw Indianapolis. It's a tough schedule.
Not a lot of easy wins on here.
No. Later in the season, they have some coin flippish games, but I mean, would you be surprised to see Vegas favored by a field goal or better come week? What is that? 16? I think that's an offense with a lot of upside.
Right. I mean, if you're the brain trust and you're looking at the schedule, the Kenny Pickett insertion is pretty obvious.
Yeah, home.
It's either
a home game off the bye. Look at that.
Yeah, it's either week 10 off the bye. It's either week 10 off the bye, or it's that's the only time. Actually, I wouldn't put him in at Atlanta. I wouldn't put him in home versus Baltimore. It's pretty obvious. You're coming off the bye, and it's Kenny Pickett time if Mitch Trubisky isn't working weeks 1 through 8. And it's a good chance Mitch is not going to look like it's working weeks 1 through 8 because you got to play Cincy, Buffalo, Tampa, and then the other kind of coin flippish games. You're a meaningful dog. Realistically, you could be 3-1 if you beat New England, Cleveland without Watson, and Jets after getting beat by Cincinnati, presumably in opening week. But then that 3-1 turns into 3-5 as you go into the bye, and then it's time. And then if that losing streak into the bye precedes the switch of quarterback, then you get to see what Pickett looks like in wet weather. Home games against New Orleans, Cincy, those are tough defenses. Home game against Baltimore, that's a tough defense. Home game against Vegas, that's not going to be a +1.5, but maybe competitive. I don't know. A lot of tough defenses for Pickett to go head to head with down the home stretch there. So this sets up for him to have kind of a characteristic rookie quarterback that we're not excited about, does things that we're not excited about. Kind of a finale to the season.
Yeah, I was going to say, and just, before anyone asks, and I think people have kind of examined this with the Titans and the Falcons and now this team. It's like, is that enough of a schedule to compete for Rookie of the Year? First off, none of the quarterbacks can be doing anything, and 7 different wide receivers have to be disciplining compared to their projections. It's hard without playing a full season, or at least 3/4 of a season. And again, going up against Indy, Baltimore, Cleveland late, Cincinnati, it's probably just not going to be successful enough for. Well, and then the kicker is the fucking price right now is Looney Tunes. I'm saying more of a, hey, there's been some wide receivers that played okay, and Pickett is a big number in week 7 or 8. Should I take a ticket because I think he's going to play the second half of the season? It's tough. You don't see it when they don't play. They don't play at least 10 games or so. Probably more. You probably need more than that. So not something I'm interested in. I am interested as just an outside observer and a fan of doing things the right way. I'm hoping they go 1-7. I just want to see them.
Of course.
I don't want the the scenario where Mitch plays well and we don't see much Pickett. Get him in there. Let's
Right.
see what we got.
Right. And those final 9 games are tough. And I think Pickett would do well to go 3-6, which means this is a 4-win team. If that manifests, this is like a 4-13 kind of a season. And really at the end of the stretch,
4 and 7 feels like it happens a lot.
If TJ Watt's a little banged up, you put him on ice. If Cam Hayward could use a little blow because he's been playing for 10, 11 seasons, then, you put him on ice and, let some of your younger guys get reps. And then all of a sudden you have a very different looking kind of very, different power rating for this team than the market currently has them, which is kind of around neutral. I think pretty clearly the offense, in my opinion, ought to be power rated as bottom 5. Or at least bottom 7. And I think the defense is fair on the high side of better than average, but, has potential to hit average just because of the pass defense and, some of the secondary matchup issues.
Sure.
Couple of rest disadvantages there in your schedule. No spots that I'm like, like that looks bad. Travel's not
I know,
bad.
but the big rest disadvantage coming against your home game with Cincy, that sucks.
Oh yeah. You know what the game I'm most excited about on this whole schedule actually? That Saturday night game on Christmas Eve. You're going to get to see a cold night, Heinz Field or whatever the hell it's called now. Kenny Pickett out there, those little hands in his gloves. Yeah, that one is going to be fascinating. Yeah.
So, all right, let's take a look at these odds.
Yeah.
Unbettable team.
70-1 to win the Super Bowl, 37-1 to win the AFC North, plus 950. It's not crazy, but I'm not going to get involved. To make the playoffs, plus 330 is yes. That is crazy. No is minus 460. Regular season win total over 7.5 is minus 105. Under 7.5, minus 115. I think under is a fair look here. I think my price to win the AFC North is a little better than plus 950, but I wouldn't bet it. And then to make the playoffs, I'm closer to yes needing to be in the 440 range, and it's 330.
I hate a division price where the whole damn division is compete.
Has to get hurt again.
Yeah, like you need Brissett to suck. You need the Ravens to have almost the same amount of injuries as last year, and you need Cincinnati to rest like a motherfucker. Like it's a parlay. You're playing like a 4-leg parlay, and one of the legs is also like, hey, Matt Canada and Mitch Trubisky strike gold. That seems like a long shot as well. So I'd agree on the under. Not a huge edge. I probably won't be putting any money on this team long term for the season. I do have some pickings. Rookie of the year. Again, there's places that had rogue numbers. They never let you bet very much, but I don't know. It's one of those things where, Drew, would you rather have $100 at 50-1 or $500 at like 16? Sometimes I just like to, jack it to that number. Like, oh yeah, look at that. I got a good number, guys. Plus, I don't love, like I was saying this in the fantasy football chat when I was ragging on fantasy. Like, I get mad every time I place another season-long bet. It's like, man, this is just money I should be churning in tennis or college football or playing in other things. Instead, I'm looking at, it's like, I look at my week when I reevaluate how I'm betting. And it's like, man, I had a really nice week, and I have less money in my accounts than I did at the beginning of the week because I placed 7 more fucking NFL futures. Like I'm going backwards here, guys. So, betting plan of attack, anything?
I mean, pretty obviously, if this defense realizes its potential to the upside, this is the easiest under team on the board. Like I said, I think the offensive scheme keeps this, even if some things click, some things work. Najee Harris takes a step forward. The wide receiver core is sick. The offensive line is not as bad as you thought. Mitch Trubisky has some tread left on the tires. I still see a ceiling on these guys where they're probably not scoring more than 28 per game in any given game. So, in general, decent team to tease as a dog, decent team to look for underspots. And otherwise, I'm probably not going to get much involved with these guys. What about you?
Yeah, if there's a team that's really susceptible to pass rush and doesn't have the wide receiver core to challenge the secondary, doesn't have a smart enough running scheme to really take advantage of beating up on the second level, it's even at a lower numbers, like you're going to be betting like an under 42 in a game like that, but it still might be the right move. So, if you're looking at totals with this team, I won't be looking at them a lot as a dog unless we get some big prices.
Do you agree with me that they're a
I
decent
hate betting
teaser
a dog for maybe a decent teaser like, but again, I don't like a dog or a teaser as a dog with a team that can't stop the run. It's like, oh man, they just need to stop this team from scoring. Like, what's the opposite of a garbage touchdown? The garbage touchdown with the team that's ahead. You know what I mean? Like,
insurance touchdown.
The insurance one they don't need with like a minute left. And it's like, oh my God, they just are giving up like 10 yards of carry against
the front door cover.
Run the clock out. Yeah, front door cover. So I'm not scared. Not a little scared of this team.
Okay, so week 1 against Cincinnati, I've gotten the sense or the whiff that they're going to be a hot side there, and that number is going to come down. It's 6.5 right now. People aren't really warm on Cincinnati. No, I'm out. 44.5 as the total, 6.5 as the side. I don't think that's playable, but I'm going to monitor that market a little bit. Let's see.
I might lay it.
You might lay it? Well, we'll get to Cincinnati and whether the market is too cold on those guys on Wednesday, so tune in. But let's talk about your Cleveland Brownies.
Yeah, I'm gonna do one more pause, and we will do our final of 32 podcasts. No, we won't. Fuck, we have Wednesday. But can't come back from vacation like this. God damn it. 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the deep dive. Thanks for nothing, Browns. You left us in just a friggin' mess of trying to figure out how the NFL shape was going to look this season because of your acquisition of Deshaun Watson and then the ongoing drama about his suspension, which was my least favorite subplot of the entire offseason by margin. But here we are now. Now we know. We know what the 2022 fabric is going to look like a little bit more carefully, what the future going forward looks like for the Cleveland Browns, and it is centered around a man who is conducted himself unprofessionally, to put it as politely as possible, in recent years, and who we haven't seen play in a while, and who doesn't really move the needle for me one way or the other in 2022 because of his unavailability in Deshaun Watson. And the Cleveland Browns sit third in terms of expected performance in the AFC North. And I think you have to acknowledge that is only because outside of the quarterback position, this roster is absolutely stacked. They are loaded with talent to the tune of, how in the world did you put this team together with, in the salary cap era and also pay Deshaun Watson all that money? And while, yes, I will acknowledge there are holes in the receiver room, there are holes in the, in portions of the secondary. This is still like from 2 to 53, like probably in the conversation with best rosters in the NFL. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, outside of the quarterback spot. And yeah, if the craziness had ensued and we ended up in like court or something weird and Watson played the whole year, it should be like, fuck, this is one of our favorites from the AFC. They're very good. And it's been a shrewd front office as far as a lot of the moves. Again, we're going to say more nice things about the front office. Bit of a goofy year, but I mean, we had the same thing you just said. Like, it was a very good roster outside of Baker. And that wasn't all his fault. He was playing through some injuries. We saw some just subpar play because of decision-making. I don't want to let the shoulder and the other injuries take all the credit. He made some bad decisions. That's a theme, I guess, with the Cleveland quarterbacks, but he was injured for chunks of the season. They were kind of in a blender with a tough schedule. Nobody really expected Cincinnati to pop off and be the team that they were, and then they played a bunch of other pretty tough teams. They went 1-1 against Cincy. They gave up a shitload to New England. I would have to go back and look at that box score, but you still had a pretty tough division. And like we talked about with Pittsburgh was surprising-ish, especially if you had to play them late in the year when your season was kind of unraveling as it was, but you had to go to Green Bay. You had to play, like you said, Cincy twice. You got started off in Kansas City. I thought we had that game. I didn't have money line on that. I remember I had the Browns against the spread, and I'm like, oh, this is easy. They look so good. And then that ended up being a goddamn sweat.
Big time sweat.
So they ended up with that. They had to go the double of going to Minnesota and then going to the Chargers was rough. That game against the Chargers was electric, though. I think like damn near 100 points in that one. And then, they got their wins where they could, but it was a tough schedule and they had some injuries, a little bit of strife here and there. And maybe, I don't know, it just didn't seem like I hate to use stupid, cliches like this, but man, the team just didn't seem like hungry like they were the year before. Like 2 years ago, it's like this team was excited to, hey, we're going to do this. We're a competitor in this division. They went to the playoffs. They hadn't done that ever. It was like an exciting team. And yeah, last year was ugly at times, really ugly at times, and ended up missing the playoffs.
Yeah, bunch of no shows.
Fucking Pittsburgh Steelers made the playoffs.
Yeah. The Browns absolutely wrecked my futures portfolio last year. They were one of the teams that I was more bullish on heading into the season. That ultimately, that you brought that week 1 game, they're a blocked punt away from winning that. They were out to a 15-3 lead in that one, 22-10 going into halftime. I think without the special teams era, they probably are at least defending the lead at the end there. And they're a team that was set up well to defend the lead because they have the world's best, scheme and rushing attack in terms of the way that they were rostered. And they have a defense that could rush the passers. So it was like from a rubric standpoint, from an archetype standpoint, they were a team that looked absolutely like they should have overachieved in terms of win-loss, and they just didn't, and it was all Baker. And I'm not excusing at all the arm injury, because I think you kind of pointed out something important, which was the team itself was not really performing. Every portion was not performing up to the level with Baker out there. Like they didn't really come to play for the guy. And I'm not even really speculating on this regard. Case Keenum made 2 starts, went 2-0. Nick Mullins made a start and was extremely close to saving this team's playoff hopes down the home stretch. Like the team just in general rallied around the other guys, not Mayfield, more than they played hard for him. And I think whatever was going on with his chemistry with the rest of this team in the locker room was not good, on top of the fact that I think if you had played a full season with Case Keenum or Nick Mullins as your quarterback, Browns probably go to the playoffs. They probably do, because Mayfield's mistakes were just backbreakers. And
yeah, and that's funny. Like Keenum is that guy too. Keenum's the guy that takes a roster like this, and they used to have a saying about Leroy Horde. Remember Leroy Horde?
Yes.
Running back, fullback, kind of. He was a running back, but he was a fucking fullback. I said Leroy Horde, if you needed 1 yard, he'd get you 3. If you needed 5 yards, he'd get you 3. Like that. Case Keenum. Like he wasn't going. This was a good roster. He wasn't going to win 14 games.
Yeah.
But he wasn't going to lose 14. Like he was going to win just 10 games with this roster. And he did play for the Browns too. He played for the Vikes still. That's why special place in my heart. But Case Keenum, maybe even Mullins, might have had half decent success with this team. There was a little bit of the OBJ stuff. They ended up kicking him to the curb. He found good for him. He landed in the right spot, I guess. But they kind of had a good. That's the other thing too. They kind of had a good draft.
Yeah,
like they added a couple of decent young defensive pieces.
You're talking about
Delpit.
Heading into last season. Yeah.
Delpit was essentially like the Kevin White joke, where it's like he's kind of hey, this is getting our first looks at this, and they added a few nice pieces to this defense, and it just we're kind of at a loss here. I looked at this for a while this afternoon, and quarterback injuries are going to derail any team, but it still just felt like this team massively underperformed.
What's a good, the right lens to kind of look at them? It is against the spread. You want to guess what their record was against the spread last year, Andy?
Oh, well, like 6-11.
6-11, exactly. When they were favored, 3-7. This team could not step up and give you a solid effort week in, week out, particularly from week 10 on. They had a stretch where they lost against the spread 5 in a row from week 10 to week 14. That included eking out wins by 3 against the Lions and against the sad Ravens, who had nobody. They lost badly to New England. The Ravens and the Raiders nipped them, in too close contests. They're just the bright spots on their schedule, like in hindsight, feel more like random and anomalous than the losses. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's something too that maybe doesn't get talked about. We bring this up with Green Bay. It was problems all over the place on special teams, but they also only made 72% of their field goals. You're going to lose close games if you miss 30% of your goddamn field goals too. And they weren't all just like long ones. They missed they made 4 out of 10 from 40 to 49 yards as a team. It's not good.
No, it's really
Chase
not.
McLaughlin, 15 of 21, guys. It's funny, he made everyone from 50 plus. Just couldn't make those 40-yarders. Weird. Maybe they need to take some penalties, move them back a little bit.
But yeah, you circle like a really good game for them, like the Week 9 win at Cincinnati, where they went in and punked the Bengals 41-16, and you're like, how did they do that? Like, this team wasn't playing winning football at all. Like, how do they bounce back from a 15-10 loss to the Steelers, where they were 4.5-point favorites, and then go to Cincinnati and do that as 2.5-point dogs? It was weird. They underachieved dramatically.
It was like do you remember that game? Yeah. It was like all like crazy Madden touchdowns like that. It was a long pick return, and then God, I have to pull up the roster. Who's the receiver with 3 names?
Donovan
DPJ.
Jones.
He had like a long one, and then Chubb rattled off a long one. Now I have the box score up. Very weird game. I'm trying to look at Baker's stats for that one. 14 of 21 for 218 yards.
Yeah. And from there to show up the next week, or to no show the next week and lose 45-7.
That's the thing. 218 yards and your team scores 41 points. I suppose one was a special or a defensive touchdown, but still, like, he never had like Burrow had a good game if he didn't throw those 2 picks, I guess. But yeah.
It was weird.
A weird team to reckon with all year long.
Yeah. Massive underachievement based on the timing for Mayfield in terms of where he was in his arc of trying to get that contract number 2. It was the worst possible time to have a bad time. It was the worst possible year for him to have a bad year. The pressure may have been a factor in some of his, inability to kind of keep it together. Certainly felt like the team did not love playing with him for whatever reason. And certainly felt like, Cleveland overall, 2021 was just an extreme disappointment considering how talented this roster was. And I think that leads us right into then their decision-making in the offseason, which was, look, we've tried it every which way here. we give up. We're just going to back the truck up for, for this very clearly well-documented pervert. And it's weird how that has gone down. But, desperate times, I think, is, taking them in this direction. But
Yeah.
I guess when you step back, what are some of your kind of overarching thoughts on their decision to tack into the quarterback space by giving away future assets and backing up the Brinks truck for a guy who's a huge character question mark?
If you look at the underlying stats and what he had to work with, like his ceiling is top 5 quarterback in the league.
Yes.
And those just don't come along. Like, again, we talked about this a little. Maybe during the middle of the summer, he said they probably had a meeting and said, like, hey, this guy is problematic. There's issues. We could be facing a big suspension. He might go to jail. I don't know. But from a business standpoint, if we take all that aside, when's the next time one of these guys is going to be available and we can get him? Like, it's such a long view kind of play. And again, it's funny how, I don't know, I hate to like rate things of egregiousness, but man, people forget in a big hurry. They probably had this conversation too. Like, hey, remember those pictures that came out when Adrian Peterson beat his kid, or the term, when Michael Vick got in trouble, there was a term floated around that they found on his compound called a rape stand, where they would put the female dogs so they could breed them because they were so mean. Like, that shit was, it was right in your face, and it was really rough. And then it's like 10 months later, nobody gives a shit. It's wild. Well, with Vick's case, it was a little longer. He had to go to the clink, but it's, he comes back, he's playing for Philly, and everyone loves Mike Vick again. It's like, oh, look at that run. Like, they probably had that conversation. Like, it'll pass. Like, shit like this just goes away. People love football. And it's, I don't know, sad reality of life. That sucks. But again, the opportunity cost compared to what they could get long-term for having a top quarterback, I don't know, probably worth it, which sucks in the grand scheme of how business works, but it's business, and they did it. So now they're stuck with it. They got 11 games of him sitting out, and here we are trying to prognosticate this team with Jacoby Brissett, because that is what we're going to see. And again, when we were sitting here doing this in the summer, we were looking at, hey, they gave him a really easy first 4 games. Maybe it's a 4-game suspension. That's not what we're looking at anymore. We have Jacoby Brissett all the way through September, all the way through October, and part of the way through November there.
All of November, yeah. He's not back until
all of November.
Week 13.
So Week 13 at Houston, which is a funny little wrinkle too, but it turned into, all right, they can hang with, Carolina, maybe get a win. Brissett can beat the Jets. Pittsburgh's not good. Atlanta's not good. And then you're back. And then all of a sudden this team is taking off. But now it's like, oh, now we get the Chargers game at Baltimore, Cincy, at Miami, at Buffalo, Tampa. Like, there's a bunch of really tough games here. And it's not so much of, hey, Brissett wins 3 out of 4, or Brissett goes 2-2, and then we right the ship. Now it's, what do we have in Jacoby Brissett? And I don't know, your thoughts on him, because we've seen him play a bunch. He's started big chunks of seasons.
Well, I want to go back a small step and talk about the Watson thing in one more context, and just ask your opinion on this. So there are a lot of a lot of things that aren't said out loud about the way you decide to run a franchise.
Yeah.
If you're like, if you were like, you know what, fuck it, we're gonna scum it. Like we'll get the bad guys on a discount that no one else wants. Like, fuck it, right? Like, you've seen teams kind of tack into that in that direction before when they don't have any other choice, right? But we've never seen it on this scale. And we've also never seen what happens when you have a locker room full of really talented guys and you go out and make this kind of move and put them on the spot now to answer questions about what it's like playing with this guy, right? Like, you're right that time has a tendency to erase a lot of this pretty quickly, and certainly winning will change things drastically, right? Like, if Watson comes in and the Browns have a happy ending here and go 5-1 down the stretch and make a playoff run, then everybody's like, then all of a sudden this was like pure genius, like market inefficiency. Like, they got this guy, and like, once in a lifetime you were going to get a top 5 QB via trade, and they did it, and so it's definitely, to me, a riskier strategy than I would have thought a team that has this many talented players in win now mode would have tried. Right. And because if it's not going great, if it doesn't,
that's the thing. If it goes the
wins,
other way and he looks like shit, then it's not just, hey, you're going on the road and people are, yelling shit at you from the stands, which, I mean, that happens even if you're not a likely criminal. Like, the opposing crowd's going to yell at you, but like at that point, the home crowd turns on you, and you're no longer this, hey, we got this savior quarterback. It's like, no, we paid all this money for this creep, and he's not even good. Like, it could go sideways in a hurry. But it is funny. And like, I think about that a lot. The time, I don't know if it's the internet or what, but like, man, the news cycle just moves so much faster. Like, and again, I don't want to compare it to anything of this nature, but man, when like Columbine happened, that was such a big deal for months. And then nowadays, like, where the news cycle moves so fast, like a school shooting is like, people have forgotten about it in a day. It seems like we're on to the next tragedy. Like, everything just moves so quick nowadays, where I really wonder where we're going to be at when he comes back from his suspension. All this other shit will have happened, and we'll be sitting there and like, oh, what was, I don't even remember, like, what happened over the summer. I mean, people will remember. That's silly to say, but
but again, the context will immediately be, no, this team is not going to be in contention for a 1 seed when he comes back. They're going to be on the outside of the playoff picture looking in, and the entire conversation will be about football and the Browns and going to the playoffs, and can he string together enough success down the stretch to take these guys to the playoffs? And if so, then this was a success. And if not, then a lot of veterans are going to be looking at each other in the locker room and like, man, I'm tired. We answered all these questions. We got all this, bullshit from our friends and family. And, I'm not getting paid like that. And it didn't even really work. Like, there's this could go spoiled milk curdled quickly if it doesn't end with success, really.
And that's the biggest questions we can't answer here. We have no idea how these people feel about, I guarantee, and again, this is speaking into unanswerable questions, but I guarantee a player or two has heard about this from their wife. Like,
of course,
they're not happy that this guy's on the team. And again, these players can't do anything. They don't make personnel decisions, but like, I'm sure there's been some conversations where like, you're not hanging out with him after practice. Like, you're not going to be in that guy's posse. Like, it is maybe curious to see how this locker room reacts.
Yeah.
Again, and winning cures all, which is
and just the fact that the locker room curdled around Mayfield, I think the fact that there's a little bit of a precedent of turning on your quarterback is not a great bellwether. Or is that a reach?
No. I mean, and there was some disagreement between him. You had the OBJ for a while, with a little bit of, he was a bit of a malcontent. I mean, he had some big personality.
Ultimately, he was very much right, though.
Yeah, that's to be fair. But I don't know. We've spent a lot of time on this, and I'm looking at the schedule, which there was so much that was off the board. It's not even a very good schedule for odds and things. I'm thinking about Jacoby. I'm thinking about the situations he's been in. He's never had a great running game. He's never had a really, really great offensive line in front of him. Like, this will be a really nice situation for him to land in, and he could play well. But like you said, right off the top of the podcast, Drew, and you hit on this bigly, was they have a great roster. This is a top defense. They have a top-notch couple of pass rushers. They have good secondary pieces. They have good pieces all over on the defense. The offensive line is good despite losing a major piece. And they have two really good running backs. They have receivers that are good. They have a lot of pieces, and there's a decent chance that you're wrong about Watson comes back and they're on the outside looking in. And by decent, I don't mean over 50%.
Oh, you mean that they're in the mix for the playoffs when Watson?
Yeah, I'm saying there's I don't want to say non-zero. There's like a 20 or 25% chance that Brissett just hasn't gotten to play with a roster like this, plays really well. And again, it's a tough schedule. It's a big ask, but they're in the mix. And then you end up with Watson back. And I think maybe the funniest outcome for this whole thing would be that happens. You have no choice but to go to Watson. You can't pay a guy $230 million and then say, well, Brissett's playing well. We're not going to switch. You don't switch jockeys mid-race. You bring Watson in, and his lack of prep and lack of practicing during his suspension, he just looks like fucking garbage, and they miss the playoffs because of him. That would be a city turning on him. My God.
Oh, yeah.
That would be the hilarious ending to this whole thing. But
well, let's evaluate that with weeks 13, 14, 15 in particular.
Yeah.
Because there is
you beat Houston. Let's face it. Like, it doesn't.
No, well, Watson's going to be of a clear mind. He's taking the field and he's just going to be playing his ass off the first game back.
I mean, it's at Houston. I feel like the fans there will be nice to him, right?
He'll have a hero's welcome. He's going to get a hero's welcome. So glad to see you again.
I would wear earplugs. But yeah, no, it's a tough spot to come back in at Houston, which is a shitty team. Yes, it's a really, really bad roster. That's a tough ask. And then at Cincinnati, and at Washington, at Pittsburgh Baltimore. Isn't the worst.
Cincinnati, Baltimore, back to back are the tough ones. Like if he stubs his toe at Houston because of the weirdness, and then they lose to Cincinnati, Baltimore, even if they're competitive in those games, but that's 3 straight L's with his first 3 starts, then now we're talking like like the river's on fire. Like the people are at the stadium, Stefanski's job is probably in jeopardy. Really, like there's not going to be a way to tamp that down. Even
and the thing is too,
against Saints, Washington, Pittsburgh doesn't solve that problem.
I talk about 2020 Deshaun Watson. That's a long time ago at this point too. It's not just he missed getting reps in the preseason and he missed practice for 11 weeks. Fucker didn't play last year. Didn't really practice. God knows, I'm not sure what he was doing on the side for, just staying in shape or staying in game
Well, I think
shape,
we know what he was doing on the side.
Geez, I know I walked right into that. But staying in game shape, staying sharp as far as being a football player, I have no idea. So, I mean, there's a decent chance you beat Houston, Washington, Pittsburgh, and then lose that middle stretch, Cincinnati, Baltimore, New Orleans. Like 3-3 feels like the modal outcome there, and you probably need. So that's like if you want to make the playoffs, you probably need Brissett. You need Brissett having you in a decent spot at that point.
Yeah, no. You need to split Cincy, Baltimore, and you need to win the other 4 games. He needs to go 5-1 as a starter to take this team to the playoffs, I think. But we'll get to that. Life with Jacoby is an interesting one, and I was kind of put on the spot. Where do I, where do you, is Jacoby Brissett a bottom 5 quarterback starting week 1? And for me, he is. It's kind of close, but I don't have a ton of QBs that I can really put under him.
No, and I get it. There's not a lot of track. Or there's not a lot of track history for him to say like this could work out well, but the only way you can get him to a median quarterback in the league is throwing in keeping helping a benefit of the doubt and saying this is a really good roster. It's a really smart coaching staff, and they've prepped him. Like his ceiling is middle of the pack. I think most
Okay,
likely.
so let me throw some
I
names
think
out, and you tell me.
20th.
Let me throw.
I think 20th is kind of where he ends up because
Let me.
there's better quarterbacks, but they're on
Yeah.
worse rosters.
That part of it we'll get to, but just purely the QB. If you could swap
No, and
with other
and
week
that's
one
where I'm
starters.
saying, like,
Yeah.
a roster can elevate a bad quarterback pretty quickly.
Yeah. Would you
Case
swap?
Keenum went to the NFC title game, baby.
That's true. Would you swap? I'm just going to go down the week one rotation number here and ask you kind of toss ups, yay or nay. Would you swap Brissett for Flacco / Wilson? No,
Just
right?
avoid Wilson.
Flacco, would you swap
No.
him for Flacco?
No, I don't.
How about Mariota? Would you swap for Mariota?
God, probably.
I think yes.
It's close.
Mac Jones and Tua. Yes.
Tua, man, Tua's such a hot button. I'm not even touching that one. No answer for Tua. Mac, maybe, probably yes.
I think you're swapping them for both. Trubisky.
No.
Trey Lance and Justin Fields. Yes. Just on potential upside.
No on Trey Lance. Oh God,
Okay.
Here's the adult dating site, people.
Jalen Hurts, Jared Goff. Yes.
Yeah.
Mills.
No.
Okay. Wentz.
No.
Okay. Daniel Jones.
No.
And Geno Smith.
No.
Yeah. Okay. So you're basically right there, like bottom five.
Yeah.
bottom
No,
six,
I have him
right on that
like
board.
as far as you put him on a neutral roster, 25th,
Yeah.
26th, probably fair.
Okay.
But with this roster, like you said, a bad quarterback,
there's one I forgot.
Quarterback on a good roster, like his ceiling is cracking the top 20.
There's one I forgot. Baker Mayfield.
Oh, I mean, no, we'll leave that one alone too.
Well, they're playing week one. I don't know if you know that, Andy. I think I now let's talk about elevating with what you have on this roster, particularly the strength of your team, which is your guards. What? Your guards and your rushing run blocking. As you have two of the 5 best guards in football right now in Wyatt Teller and Joel Bitonio. And those guys still rock. And, they're non-premium positions. You don't want that to be your strength, but they're great. Jack Conklin played through a lot of injuries last year, but he's great. Jedrick Wills looks like he's a budding potential at left tackle. And you're breaking in a new center in Ethan Pocic, who I know nothing about. But doesn't really matter. The rest of those pieces around him, he can be replacement level or worse. And this is still a really, really, really good offensive line. And as you mentioned, Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, those guys are freaking awesome. And, they draw attention, they demand respect from the defense, and they can be utilized in multiple ways. And Stefanski knows exactly all the right buttons to push. So the chances that Brissett is given the opportunity to succeed because of plus EV play calling and sequencing, because of structural excellence in pass blocking and running, I think has to be real. Like you gotta think that we could see above average EPA per play type production out of him, considering the strength of the supporting cast. I think that's very real.
We haven't even mentioned Amari Cooper.
Well, that's the problem, is the wide receiver tight end situation here. David Njoku is a fine tight end. Deep. I'm not really trying to build my team around David Njoku as a tight end, but
I don't know.
Amari Cooper, Donovan Peoples-Jones, David Bell as your starting 3, Anthony Schwartz, Michael Woods as your depth. That's sus. That's extremely suspect.
Go out and get Mohamed Sanu. He just hit the
That would
free
upgrade
agency
them
market.
depth wise.
Honestly, it's not a bad depth piece, but yeah, they have some depth issues at wide receiver. Like Amari Cooper's very, very good.
Oh, and they got him
Very
for a
good.
song. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a good trade, but I don't know. Like it's
Rest of these guys suck.
It's tough, and that's the thing too. Like it's not like Amari Cooper's never gotten hurt. You're very, very fragile at wide receiver, and then you take away. It's like a three-legged stool that you're putting Jacoby Brissett in. The wide receivers are an awful wobbly leg, and you pull that out, he's going to tip over, and this team's not even going to be sniffing the playoffs when Watson comes back. So that's a bit of an issue. Although I will say, like, maybe they'll use these running backs a little more in the passing game. They're not bad pass catching backs, but none of them are getting like 50 targets. You know, they spread it around. I guess if I'm looking at all the running backs as a whole, they got 70
as a whole
between just the main three, 77 targets for 61 catches and like 500 yards and a touchdown. So maybe we see a little more of that.
I think.
I mean, and Njoku's very good. I get that he's not a wide receiver, but that's still a pretty nice piece. He can get like 50, 70 targets on his ass. And
it's backwards.
They have
like,
enough.
This
pieces.
is in the same way.
I mean, you're right. It's fragile.
Yeah, it's not. It's fragile and it's backward. It's constructed backwards, right? It's same way. Like you don't really want to guard a premium position. You don't want your two best players to be guards. You don't want your running back room to be top 5 in the NFL in terms of passing contributions. Your tight ends like middling and your wide receivers bottom 5. Like that's backwards. Like you're anti-Cincy, really. And yeah, Amari Cooper is a huge question mark for me. Other than the price you paid to get him, which I applaud the Cleveland Browns for, I don't know that I'm expecting him to be able to be a magnetic force out there that's drawing so much attention in the passing in an obvious passing situation. I don't think he's drawing so much attention that opens things up for these other guys who aren't going to be able to create separation like Donovan Peoples-Jones and Anthony Schwartz. And I have no idea what to expect out of all these kids. David Bell was a Bolitnikoff winner, right? Maybe he's got a surprise for us in the slot, but he's so small. Doesn't have an NFL body yet, so he may not be able to give you much. And I think that presents a problem if you are losing. If you're down in a game, I don't know what the comeback plan is. I really don't. You're rostered really, really, really well to play with the lead, and you're rostered really, really, really poorly to come back.
Yeah. Yeah, having a good run game isn't what gets you back in a game. So, like, that's where I'm just stuck on and I put this on the sidebar here, realistic expectations. Like, again, we give you some of these things and I because we do sports betting, we talk a lot of sports betting on the show. I don't know if you heard, but we put some of this to you as a parlay. Like, how does this team play well? And the parlay is none of the receivers get hurt. The new center, which I looked up the center, he's just been injured like a lot. He's been on the IR a ton when he was with Seattle. Like, he graded out well out of college, just hasn't had a lot of chances to prove himself yet. And you have good tackles. It's not like these are bad tackles, but yeah, your guards are studs. So you can have a really good offensive line, which again, you need them to stay healthy. So the parlay is Brissett plays the best football he's ever played. The wide receivers stay healthy, and you get a few of these coin flip wins for the first 11 weeks. And then a guy who hasn't played football in 18 months seamlessly finds his way into a new offense mid-season without the benefit of, a real camp, preseason, practice throughout the season. Wins, I don't know, probably got to win 4 of the final 6. 4 of the final 6 are on the road. So I mean, it's just so many things have to click right for this team. It really, really feels like a 2023 kind of team. Like we say
It
this a
does.
lot with teams that are like, oh man, this team could win 8 games and that would suck for them because they really, really could use a quarterback. Like going back to like Atlanta or some of these teams where it's like, man, if you tanked, you have enough pieces where a couple free agents here and a high draft pick at quarterback there, and all of a sudden you're on the road to being a trendy team in a year or two. This is another one where it's not like, man, this team is going to suck ass and they should embrace it. But boy, would this team benefit from having like a top 15 pick. Like I don't know if this team can compete with that situation, especially in a tough AFC. End up, so here's the other thing too. Cincinnati, unless you believe in big regression, is probably going to be a good team again. Baltimore was a good team who had a million injuries. You're in a really tough division as well. So let's say everything goes right. Your path to winning and going to the playoffs is probably a wild card team, which means your season into the playoffs leads to at Washington, at Pittsburgh, at whichever division winner you get. Like 3 straight road games into the playoffs. That's never a recipe for success either. So many things going against this team. John Lennon wrote a song about that.
Yeah, you could be a spoiler if you can get in as a 6-7 seed.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, if Watson shows no signs of rest and, he's back, and, those last 6 games, he shows up well. He beats the shit out of a bad Houston team. Maybe they sneak one past Cincinnati. Oh, God. Winning 2 out of 3, Cincinnati, Baltimore, New Orleans, feels like a necessity. And then also probably winning those last 2 road games. Like, it's just, they're not going to be in a position where, Brissett, Brissett built this big lead for you. All you have to do is show up and kind of half-ass it. Like, he really has to pop back and play like a guy who hasn't missed 18 months of football coming into a new system. It's all duckies and bunnies when you look at this is Watson's ceiling, but the situation just isn't good for this team. So, realistically, it's a middling team, and honestly, I'm fine with that. I'm not excited about this team in the playoffs from a watching standpoint. Like, I'd rather see a multitude of other AFC teams compete for the 6 or 7 spot. I think it'd be a better game.
Sure. I mean, you get a good game out of the Browns if they're a wild card, but at least an entertaining game, I would say. But yeah, this is the fact that you can only really play one way, which is with the lead, is a problem. And in a tough AFC where you have so many offenses that are going to be able to put points on you, even if your defense surprises to the good, you're going to need some ability to come back in narrow margin games, and I just don't see them having that with the way it's rostered, even with Watson on the field. So ultimately, I don't think they're in they're not in the discussion about the overall fabric of how championship is decided this year. I don't think. Let's look at the schedule though.
I love the schedule grid.
A lot off the board here.
A lot of off the board. And I mean, you can
serious market movement in that week 1 game where Carolina is now 2.5-point favorites. That has been one-way action for months now. And I guess people are excited about Baker Mayfield down there. I'm not seeing it, but that's an interesting matchup.
Odd.
Yeah.
Well, LaVishka Chenault now.
Yeah.
So yeah, Carolina gets to 3. I might have to play this. Not going to feel like a good one, but boy,
yeah, 100%.
I'm not sure my numbers can support Baker Mayfield as a 3-point favorite.
No.
He didn't even get a full. He's not going to get the full complement of camp either. The lines that we do have that. The Jets game. I don't know. That probably feels pretty fair. We just shit on Pittsburgh plenty. Atlanta's bad. The Chargers, I'm getting, what would you have that at home versus the Chargers? 3.5,
LA
right?
minus 3.5.
3.5. New England at home.
Yeah,
Plus
minus
one.
2.
Plus 1.5.
Okay. All right.
At that point, it might be less because I'm not super high in New England.
I don't know what to say about it.
At Baltimore.
Really,
you're a
like,
decent dog.
Yeah. Really
Cincy.
soft. Really soft schedule to start.
It is. It is not. It's not terrible to start, but then that like when you do get Watson right before you get Watson back too, you might be looking at a 3-game losing streak.
Bang.
Yeah. If Miami is, if we see anything out of Tua, that's a tough game at Miami, at Buffalo, and then Tampa. So bang, and then you get Watson back. So.
Yeah, I think realistically, you're going into your bye at 500 or a little above, and you're coming out of your bye with at best 1 and 2. At which point you're 500 through 11 games, and you have 6 remaining, and you have to go, I think, 5-1 realistically to make a playoff run at that point. Yeah. I think you're going to have to really overachieve through the first half of the season in order to have less pressure on your new starting quarterback when he comes back to play week 13.
Yeah, in the scenario where like Brissett puts you in a good position, you've beaten Carolina on the road, you took care of the Jets, Pittsburgh, Atlanta, you've beaten New England, maybe you even stole the Cincinnati game at home. Like you have to have a lot of that stuff going right. And then, really tough stretch coming out of the bye. You have the rest advantage, but it's a trip down to Miami. And then at Buffalo is, what are they? Touchdown?
7.5.
Yeah, I put a TD right now. Well, it might be a lot different depending on how that team looks at that point.
It's in Buffalo. That's got to be at least 7.5.
Yeah, coming off the back-to-back too, probably 7.5, 8. So can you imagine if they lose to Miami?
Home versus Tampa, you're probably 4.5, assuming Tampa is relatively healthy, coming off their bye. Yeah, you have no margin for error in those first 2 games with Watson at Houston, at Cincy. No margin for error.
Yeah, and it's just really hard to make a case for, hey, this defense is really good, and that's going to carry them, because that just means you're winning. You're winning a bunch of close games, and if they're close games and you're behind late, again, you're not set up as a comeback team. You're a good running team with a good defense. That's a team that plays well with a 3-point lead late, not with a 3-point deficit. So,
exactly.
And as Johnny points out, and I think we talked about this a little, like Watson can't practice with the team, like just coming in fucking cold. Like that might not be great. As good as I think he is, as good as I think he can be, it's a big ask. So, Badine Cashin going 5. Look at that. I'm gonna watch some tennis tonight when I get home. So odds.
Tsitsipas has saved like 10 match points in
match points
in this service game. I think. Yeah, I don't really get excited about any of these prices. 30-1 to win the Super Bowl. I think I'm closer to 40, 45, 21 to win the AFC. As mentioned, super tough to see them go road to finish the season and then win 3 road games if they haven't won the AFC North. So forget about AFC at 21-1 to win the AFC North plus 370. Is an interesting one because, again, with Watson surely as the QB, the margin between them and the other 2 in this division, the Bengals and the Ravens, is probably not that big. And ball bounces their way in those 2 late games and they win both and they finish 6-0. This team's probably winning the North. If they finish 3-3, which you mentioned was the modal expectation, then they're not making the playoffs. And so interesting kind of price point there through plus 370, but not enough to get me inspired. And then to make the playoffs, yes, plus 138, no is minus 170. That is almost exactly where I am in terms of price for this. And then regular season win total over 8.5 is plus 135. Under 8.5 is minus 160. Between playoffs, yes, plus 138, and over 8.5 plus 135. Andy, do you see an obvious misprice there?
I would just play the over 8.5.
Yeah,
like,
9 wins might not get you into the playoffs in the AFC.
There's a lot of scenarios where it doesn't get you. There's a lot of scenarios where you finish tied for 4th in the division. You and the Steelers both have 9 wins. You know, if the Steelers overperform, like that's probably Steelers ceiling is like 7, 8, 9. So yeah, 9 wins is probably 3rd in the division, and there's a couple other divisions I think we might see wild cards coming out of. So
I agree.
That's a bit of a silly price, I think.
Yep, we agree. Betting plan of attack, I think, is pretty clear here.
I was just going to bring that up too. Is that price on over plus 138 to make the playoffs? Those are markets that nowadays are not just up preseason. That's the stuff that's up all year long. Between they take it down on Sundays, put it back up on Monday or Tuesday. Maybe right before Watson comes back, that number's probably bigger. Or right after that rough stretch of games. Depending what other teams are doing. Maybe it's a team to evaluate midseason, look at some of the prices for that. If you think it's going to work out, I'm probably out on that.
So I think this is a team that you back and feel good about it when they're going up against the team that has a bottom half of the league offense and or bottom half of the league quarterback, and they have some weakness on the defense, like not a complete defense, right? Because that kind of team, this Browns squad can get a lead on and then can put that lead away. So I do think that there is a kind of a puzzle piece fits the right hole in terms of who you want to get involved with if it's at or around a pick 'em. Jets certainly in the conversation.
Yeah, like you said, it's a front runner.
The Panthers,
front running kind of team.
These guys are going to be great front running. Yeah. They're going to win
second half team.
First 4 here probably.
With a lead against like if Baker looks bad, the receivers aren't on the same page. It's a close game at half. Cleveland second half maybe a look price dependent. Like they are a front running team. Like a 3-point lead is a lot bigger with the Cleveland Browns than it is with some teams. I absolutely think they might win this first game. Just I'm not sold on the Baker Mayfield experience. So
no.
I don't know. That's kind of it's probably one of the most bet games in week 1 over the summer. And it's like the one I want to watch the least.
Oh, 100%.
I'm not excited about that one at all.
No.
And then, Johnny says the Tampa Bay game, not a good matchup for them. If Tampa Bay's offensive line gets their shit together, not everyone turns out to be missing the whole season. And it's not looking like that's the case, but
I'm laying the road chalk there happily.
That is to say a team with an offensive line / scheme that can take this pass rush out of the equation and has receivers they can hit, especially with quick stuff. Not a great matchup. And then again, that kind of team with a lead, especially with a good defense, good linebackers that can stop the run. Like that's a nightmare matchup for a team like this. So a healthy Tampa Bay team is probably undervalued at whatever they open at.
Bad news for you. I think Cincinnati matches up against you pretty well also. You don't have the speed for their wide receiver group. You don't have the the advantage you had of your O-line versus your D-line versus their O-line is diminished. So you can't just create havoc with your pass rush anymore. I think there's the matchups against the Ravens are somewhat suspect as well. Lamar Jackson's speed looks to be a problem.
I'm excited to talk Ravens later in the week. It felt like we lost a whole season of the Ravens. I'm not even going to talk 2021. We're only going to talk 2020 Ravens when we get there. So
I like it. Okay. Well, all right. We got not a lot of betting plan of attack since not a lot of strong opinions there, but this is it's a team we're going to have some tough decisions on week in, week out, backing or fading.
Yeah, tricky team to evaluate, and we'll see. But feels like an uphill battle with all the things that they need to overcome to try to make the playoffs in the AFC. So that's why they were a Monday team. And as we get,
you know what else? If they overachieve this year, I'm not going to be salty at all. I'm going to be exceptionally annoyed. I'm going to be so pissed if they overachieve this year after doing me dirty last year the way that they did. So, if Jacoby Brissett is giving them, if Jacoby Brissett is doing what Case Keenum could have done for them last year when I was bellyaching that they needed to bench Baker, it's going to be tough for me to get over. So that should be fun. That'll be a fun side plot to the season.
Yeah. So, all right, one more of these. We will do.
I love it, man. The grand finale.
The grand finale. Our Ravens and our Bengals. They weren't our Bengals last year, but I'm excited about this team again this year. So catch you Wednesday if you're in the YouTube chat. Hit the thumbs up like Mickey Hill just did, except not in comment form. Actually hit the thumbs up button. Thanks for joining us, everyone, except for nude-hd.xyz, the best adult dating site. Getting sick of that guy. So, for me and Drew.
Put him in timeout.
Put him in timeout, Dan. There we go.
There we go.
See you guys.